It's great to be here and to continue Melanie's presentation ideas with a panel of other experts looking at the future. I will call up to the stage Senior Vice President and Director of Research for Horizon Media, Brad Adgate, co-founder of Sequent Partners, Jim Spaeth, and Managing Director of Marketing and Research for JCDecaux One World, Neil Edelston. Sure. So we're going to have, hopefully, a very active dialogue together. I don't know why there's an extra chair, but okay. We have talked a little bit yesterday, and I thought that the conversations this morning from Jack, Rocky, and Melanie kind of changed the direction I'm going to go in, so bear with me. We are going to wing it from here, but I think we are all capable of that. For you all, I am in the minority in the room because I am a media generalist. I work at ESPN, and I'm responsible for all media decisions across all platforms. So I am very engaged in not only outdoor ratings, but what's going on the internet, mobile, TV, radio, place-based, you name it. We've got it as a company, and my team has to now place media across all those platforms. As such, I'm really interested in first-party data. We have a lot of it at ESPN, and how I can use that first-party data across all platforms. I'm also done a real big proponent of cross-media data, and we'll talk a little bit about that as it pertains to ROI today. Very interested about that. But my other job is I am on the TAB, and I am leading the Research Futures Committee, which is what we've been talking about today and yesterday. And we're going to hear a little bit more about what this committee is going to be working on in the next 90 days, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. So I'm going to start with Melanie, and wanted to talk about a phenomenon that I'm seeing, and you actually hit on it a little bit. When I started in the industry 19 years ago, I was told, even though your target is younger, aspire older. So go after an older target. So I did that. But now I'm noticing, and I believe this to be true, that the aspiration is actually younger. Everything you talked about was the trends were coming from the millennial group, and we haven't really talked all that much about millennials that much during this conference. But I'm finding that I think if I want to move my business, I have to target younger because they're bringing everyone else along with them. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Yeah, it's we actually call it the ageless society. So in fact, the sort of values and attitudes increasingly between generations are less different than they used to be.
Right.
And this is particularly true of the baby boomers and their children who are sort of moving. And there's another associated thing that we're calling the life stage delay. So there is a kind of reification of youthfulness. When I talked about play,
right.
That again is about sort of, enjoying the youthful aspects of who we are. And there's a lot of evidence that even as they get older and older, the baby boomers, that they're still holding on to the desire to be able to express these more youthful aspects of themselves.
Right.
And we'll sort of invest quite a lot in that.
So I think I read a statistic recently that middle-aged women are still the biggest gamers on the internet. They're playing Candy Crush, which I do, and I'm middle-aged, Farmville, Sudoku, like not your traditional video games, but they're still engaging quite well now on mobile and on desktop. So I'm going to move over to Brad.
Yeah.
Brad, you're the researcher on the group at a big agency.
Yeah.
How is Horizon using all of this data to help their planners make better decisions?
Well, actually, it's all on our desktops right now. So, the planning group, the activation, the out-of-home group, direct response group, all of this information is pretty much readily available. I mean, what's out there is what we get our hands on. And, I think that we talked about this yesterday. I mean, you think about big data, and I know it's an overused term, but we're looking at big data on our side, too.
Sure.
We're looking at, it's kind of like it's a swimming lane, and out of home is in one lane, and mobile's in another lane, and online's in another lane, And what we're doing is just taking all the lanes out and are in this big pool of data, and that we're able to do cross-platform evaluations, know what the contributions are of each media. And so I think it really helps advertisers and our clients know what each one of them is contributing to an overall media schedule. And I've been at Horizon, I'm kind of like a media journalist like you. I've been at Horizon for 16 of the 25 years, and it's been very exciting to see the evolution of how these different practices have become specialists. And I'm very grateful that I had an opportunity to be exposed to all of this media early on, but it's gotten much more specialized, and a lot of it's educating our clients. A lot of it is knowing certain clients get it better than others, which is true, I think, of any media company. But it's for instance, for Out of Home, it's embedded in our new business initiatives, and so they know early on what the capabilities are and what the results have been.
Do you think, this is going to be a provocative question,
Oh boy.
but do you think that it's become too specialized and that's to the detriment of the overall media mix?
That's a very interesting question. Yeah, sometimes I think that. I think about, but if you go back and think about what it was like, when you joined the industry and I joined the industry, it was a lot simpler. I don't know how you could possibly.
There was no internet.
There was no internet. There was no time shifting. There was no. The metrics weren't there for Out of Home like
Sure.
it is today. The data isn't there. So, it's great if you could do that, but I think your head would explode. I know Jack was talking about all this information about exabytes and yottabytes, and I think there's now brontobytes, which is 10 to the 27th power of bytes. So, we are being swamped with this, and ideally in utopian world, yeah, you'd like to, but I think it does help to have people who have knowledge of a specific practice.
Okay. So, Jim, you're going to be working on ROI for us, which I was so excited to see yesterday. It was I scratched my head a little bit, but in the Morgan Stanley presentation, ROI was the number one thing local advertisers were looking for.
I took a picture of that slide.
Good, that's great. But price wasn't necessarily in line with ROI, and I think a great thing was salespeople were trending higher than they have been in the past relationships. But when you think about local versus national, how are you going to reconcile ROI for the two? Because to some degree they're the same,
Right.
but on another degree they're vastly different.
That operate very differently, yeah. Well, Mary, I want to start with one comment, though, first. Because
Sure.
I sat in the audience yesterday, and I heard something that was absolutely shocking. I couldn't believe my ears. And it was from my good friend Jack Myers, who over the years, I've known Jack to be a smart guy. I have never heard him say anything this stupid.
Oh.
Sorry, Jack. Sorry. Forgive me. I'm sorry. Yesterday, Jack wheeled out that old, tired John Wanamaker quote. You know the one. I know only half my advertising is working for me. I don't know which one, blah, 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 blah. You've heard it before. You've heard it a million times. And I just want to say, it's not true. It hasn't been true for at least 25 years. Marketing mix modeling, a practice of trying to understand the return on investment from advertising, from marketing in total, has been a commercial practice in the United States for 25 years. For many years now, the majority of advertisers will use mix modeling as a method to understand the return on investment they get from all of their marketing elements, all of their media. They set budgets using it, they allocate funds using it, and that whole practice has changed. And the reason I bring up the point, and the reason, sorry, I pick on Jack, is because the world has changed and we have to catch up. Everyone in this room has to catch up with this. I was talking to Joe a while back, and I was congratulating Joe because I know what an effort the whole TAB out-of-home ratings has been. It's been a real sea change for this industry. We heard a lot about it yesterday, how important it's become, and I congratulated him on this industry, leading this industry into the 20th century. And then I went, whoops, it's the 21st century. What's next? And what's next is ROI. So to come back to your question, Mary, it's important to understand that, actually, let me back up a second, kind of thinking about what you're asking, Brad, that the difference between a specialist in a medium, out of home in particular, a lot of local knowledge, a lot you need to know. On the other hand, it's got to fit into the overall structure of a media plan, of an advertising campaign, even a bit more broadly. And that's an important step to be able to do that. But it's even more important to understand where it fits in the advertiser's complete marketing plan. What role does it play? And Melanie said so many interesting and provocative things about how consumers are changing. And most of those were facilitated, I almost feel like every one, but most of those were facilitated by technology,
Right.
by mobile technology in many, many instances. So, trying to understand the role of out-of-home in the whole marketing framework is just a huge leap up. It's like having worked in the mines for many, many years and suddenly trying to climb to the mountaintop. But I'm sure everyone in this room is capable of doing it. So, and I'm going to get to your question in just a second. But before I do that, I want to make one other comment, which is to say, if any of this is provocative or interesting, and if you think it's important, this afternoon at 3:30, I know you were planning on being on the golf course, but it's going to be raining. So this might be better than standing out in the rain. Come to Sebastian I, the room on the corner, at 3:30, and we're going to talk about this initiative that Mary has referenced. So back to your question.
Thank you.
Local versus national. You heard Melanie talk in a few different ways about the power of here, standing up for the community, or providing a service to consumers, providing some information, things of that sort. And that a lot of that is potentially facilitated by out-of-home and mobile working in partnership. And I suspect we may hear more about that because I know Greg Stewart's up soon, and Greg always says interesting things. That is entirely possible to capture in these analytic tools, in these modeling tools. The interaction among the media is entirely possible. And I'll give you an example of one just to kind of support my claim. Television, you remember television, is a tremendous generator of word of mouth. And in some part, the way in which television advertising proves effective is by generating word of mouth about brands. And this has been measured and demonstrated and will be measured and demonstrated again. When I think about television, and then I think about at a home, I think about the ability to generate word of mouth about a brand must be just tremendous. And that has a lot to do with location and local advantage and so on. So as we think about helping this industry come up with a means of measuring the ROI and earning more dollars from advertisers, one of the things we're going to really have to pay attention to is that power of here that Melanie spoke of.
As an anecdote, I know that in my company, out of home is what I get the most phone calls about, not our TV commercials. I saw that great board, or did you see that urban panel for the NBA? It was awesome. It's not necessarily always the TV spots, although they do get a lot of acclaim. Neil, at Decaux, you manage not only what's going on in the United States, but global markets. And I know that you're very involved with the TAB and the technical committee. But how are you at Decaux, across not only the US, but globally, using data like outdoor ratings in your everyday?
The ROI initiative that you're going into now is exactly what we're doing in other markets. The advent of this type of more granular data, allowing us to look down at ROI models at a sort of store level, never mind city level, is really what's coming forward now very strongly. So we've had the ratings data for a bit longer, we've got a bit more used to it in a lot of markets, and so we're already primed and ready. And one of the things that Rocky was talking about is training, making sure everybody understands this fantastic data that you've got now that really is very local as well as being national. So you've got to get that data and see how you bring that forward into an understanding of ROI. What interests me, particularly for the US, is what you're going to do with it, because you're going to have this study, and you're going to find all the same things we found out in the UK and in other markets about the difficulty of using this data within ROI. You're going to find out all the issues about how do you define ROI, what ROI are you talking about, because the trend has been moving towards hard factors rather than the soft factors, and therefore, if you're looking at, if you're an agency with a lot of FMCG and you're looking at hard factors of ROI, you're starting to have issues with out-of-home's performance because you're not looking at all the other soft factors that we're traditionally looking at. So what we're really trying to do is educate, get people to better understand, and get this data up to the right place so out of home's performance can be seen in a fair way. All of these models have known problems, and what will be really interesting is how we educate about those known problems and how we discourse with it. And that's mostly what we're working on now.
Okay. So can you give a little bit of perspective? I know that here in the United States with the outdoor ratings, we're using a lot of INRIX data where it allows us to get, I mean, right now the data is weekly, but it could potentially become daily or hourly. What type of granular data are they using in other markets?
We go down to daily in a lot of markets. We sell digital billboards daily in a number of markets, so a client can buy them up for a day.
Right.
Within our retail portfolio, we're now experimenting with data that's linked to EPOS sales data, so we can target when people are buying products, and then the digital panels adjust for that client to reflect that time of day. So it's day part selling going through that. So it's really down to a very small level.
So I think, Melanie, you showed us some of that stuff in some of your examples earlier with the billboard in Israel. And some of the stuff that you showed with the gumball machine. How do you see, from a trend perspective, out of home and some of the data that we're able to get from outside companies to help us be smarter in making marketing decisions?
Well, I think the same point applies, that you'll probably never find one single source of data that's going to give you the whole picture.
Right.
And therefore, you know, I've been increasingly, you know, it used to be when I first started in trends that one piece of quantitative research was considered to give you quite a few answers. Nowadays, you've really got to be, it's almost like a dashboard, I think.
True.
You know, constructing different streams of views of whatever market you're looking at. I suppose the other thing I'm kind of quite interested in is, you know, thinking about this initiative that you're involved in is, you know, how do you future-proof that?
Yes.
Because the trouble with most advertising measurement systems is that they measure the past. And therefore, looking, which is, you know, necessary, that's part of what people want in return for the money they've spent, but you're also hopefully looking at what you can predict for the future. And I mean, just some example, you know, we're looking at how you might take a segmentation and really future-proof it, so you can start with, when we talk about millennials or baby boomers, actually putting some numbers on the movement of those segments, tracking their different lifestyles, but saying what's going to be happening over the next 3 to 5 years, so that people are beginning to plan ahead rather than sort of looking at the past for reference.
Very good point. Brad, how are you handling that in the agency? I think because the buck kind of stops at the agency making the recommendation to the clients, and you're getting the data. I think the gentleman from Telmar yesterday was talking about fusing data. Yeah. So how is the agency handling that?
You know, I think it really depends on one of the biggest obstacles I think we have is getting the data. I mean, so many marketers and advertisers don't want to share that. They don't want to share it. They don't want it to leave outside of the company. And it's kind of like GEICO, garbage in, garbage out. You know, your inputs in a model is only as good as the data that you're given. So, you know, we do have several models that we use, but you know, I think it really depends on where our clients are and how much they feel like sharing. And you know, you have a very good point about it only captures the past. I mean, we have no idea. You know, technology is moving so fast. I mean, you know, I was looking. Facebook started 10 years ago, and you know, there's 1.2 billion people around the world who are using it, and 1 billion of them are on mobile devices. I mean, you know, the input of that, and you know, trying to, and that's old 10 years. I mean, you know, apps didn't exist 6 years ago. I mean, there's so much. You know, this stuff is moving so fast. I think that's another part of the obstacle, particularly with millennials, who advertisers are very much interested in reaching, you know, for various reasons. These are the ones who kind of embrace these new technologies where there's very little data that's readily available, and even less good data, you know, that's readily available. So that's kind of one of the bigger the obstacles I think that we have as an agency.
Jim, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I did. on your comment about future-proofing the measurement system, because we're right now at a kind of an inflection point, and I don't want to go into too much detail because those of you who are going to go to Sebastian and I at 3:30 for the full workshop, I don't want to, you know, steal the thunder from that show. But the most common practice right now in modeling and measurement of ROI is to look at a market. And look at a market in a week, and then build up all the markets in all the weeks. So what you're really doing is looking at that market level. You're not looking at individuals. And I think that's a key in a number of ways. So if we're going to look at these kinds of unique and interesting interactions, for example, that Melanie was showing, you need to understand who the individuals are. And if in the future we're kind of doing this, being more communal and being more global, and then at the same time being more local and being more individual, that means we're going to be more different from each other, increasingly different from each other, which means an average isn't going to work. Women 25 to 54 isn't going to look like anyone. There's going to be, a kaleidoscope of women 25 to 54. So we need to understand those individually. And that means we need to be able to do this kind of ROI analysis about individual consumers or types of consumers or groups of consumers. And there's a technique that's also kind of been emerging for many, many years and has really hit its stride in recent times, and that's called single source data analysis. And again, without stealing thunder from the 3:30 workshop in Sebastian I, that's looking at an individual purchase, and the stream of media exposures that preceded it and potentially motivated and drove it. So that's a really, really promising technique. And when I say breakthrough, one of the things, just a few weeks ago, we had the Advertising Research Foundation annual conference, and there were two presentations there in particular that I found very, very interesting. One was Dave Poltrak, head of research at CBS, was using this type of data to show how his individual primetime programs had an ROI better than cable. That was his big issue, and better than the average broadcast show as well. He was trying to show that the big event programming generated a larger ROI. We've always sort of felt that intuitively. The higher rated shows have to be more valuable.
Right.
And he demonstrated it quantitatively with a number with a dollar sign in front of it. That has a lot of impact. That starts to get CFO attention. The other presentation was Clear Channel Radio. Radha Subramaniam and our friend Leslie Wood were presenting a similar ROI analysis for radio that showed how radio, when you really figure out who's driving profit, just knocks the ball out of the park every time. And that's such a real eye-opener, because when you talk about radio, a lot of people just sort of go, yeah, what else?
Yeah, I think that's all great, and I saw both those presentations at the ARF. But what strikes me is that we're still missing, and whenever we do any of this stuff, we're missing the multiple touch points. When we see David's come in and just talk specifically about CBS Primetime, that commercial and that campaign ran other places. So I'm a big proponent of 1 + 1 = 3. And I think that the modeling shows that if you're looking at the total mix or a cross-media analysis. So I just want to get the collective opinion of this panel, because I'm sure everyone has one, that how important is it in today's fragmented world, and we saw a little bit in this Melanie's presentation, that our campaigns are in multiple media, and the aggregate effect of multiple media, because I personally know in my mix models, when I add outdoor, everything amplifies. So do you want to comment on that, anybody? Because I think that we have to start thinking about out-of-home not just as a single medium, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, Rocky mentioned it, but it has to be all media and how it all works together.
Well, I give you one comment on that, because one of the things I've been very, very happy to see over the years of my career, aside from, for example, never hearing that Wanamaker quote again, or never hearing anyone want to buy a Hunter showing again, one of the things that I've been very happy to hear is, oh yeah, we put money into that medium for air cover.
Right.
What does that mean?
Doesn't mean much.
That means that's a brand manager who doesn't know why he or she put money into that medium. It's just like, well, let me get some more. And it's based on an old mass media thinking. It's I just want to reach people. I don't care which medium. They're all the same, basically. What's the cheapest way to build reach? And now we've been thinking much more about what does each medium do in a unique way. And I'll credit the web for a lot of that thinking, because the web does so many different things, and now it moves into mobile and it does so many different things. And you're not just thinking about impressions and reach and GRPs and CPMs. In media planning, I think, and Brad, you correct me if I'm wrong, we're thinking about what behavioral or attitudinal change do we want to generate in a consumer, and how does this medium help do that? And then how do they, to your point,
journey.
Mary, how do they work together?
That's right, it's the journey. Brad, do you?
Well, no, I agree with what Jim, I always agree with what Jim says. Been doing panels for years. But, you know, one of the interesting things I think is just how fluid this younger demographic is and how hard it is to harness what that is when you talk about single source.
Right.
You know, one of the, a study, you know, I'm in the Council for Research Excellence, and we did a study a few years ago, an ethnography study where you know, we took 300 people and watched it. And I thought one of the more interesting takeaways was that an 18 to 24 will be exposed to 10 screens in a day,
Right.
whereas somebody 55 plus will be half of that.
That's right.
And then even include out of home. And you think of today, you know, how prevalent mobile devices has become, and you talked about how it's, you know, it's in your bedstand at night and it's never more than 2 feet away from you if you're 18 to 34-year-old. You talk about, you know, how the automotive industry is now creating, you know, these smart cars because, you know, they're trying to get young people to buy new cars. You think of wearable devices. That is very popular with young people, even though like it does help aging baby boomers monitor their health. All of this information and all this stuff, I mean, that study is right now so old, that single source study.
Right.
But if you found it today, I think you would find that these 18 to 34-year-olds or millennials or Gen Ys, you know, would be double the 10 screens that they're exposed to. So it's a very difficult thing to quantify that, and it's a very difficult thing. I guess, you know, it's not air cover, I guess, but, you know, a lot of stuff's not being measured, but I think clients understand that, and I think that they're willing to sit and take X% of their budget to do something that might be unmeasured or might do something like a concept sell just to experiment and see what happens.
Yeah, I would say, Melanie and Neil, if you can comment on this since you guys live in a different country. We've heard in the recent, this morning and then yesterday, that there are more ad dollars going towards outdoor in other countries than here in the United States.
Very much.
So what's precipitating that? Is it data, or is it just that the marketers there are more in tune to the trends that are going on with their audiences?
Clearly, there are a whole series of factors depending on the relative position of where press was, et cetera, et cetera. But really, in Europe particularly, people got into measurement earlier, took the measurement issue. I mean, I've had Your Transit that's just been launched, great. But I've had transit in Ireland since 2004. I've had it in
So we're just
Finland
behind.
and Sweden and so on. So, you know, so it's 10 years ago I had that.
Right.
So we got into the measurement a lot earlier. The investment decisions followed because you could justify, with a visibility adjusted type approach, investing in illumination. You could justify investing in panels that were in better locations. So that the investment dollars followed the data, which showed that the products worked. So this was a key driver in what was going on in that sense.
Melanie?
I'd really prefer to answer the previous question.
Go for it.
So the way I would think about it is my principle of the space of flows, or rather
Right.
Manuel Castell's. Actually what it's about is that we can't live in a world of either or. We have to live in a world of and. And that's been true for quite a long time. But the way that we're educated and the way that we think and the way that we try and classify stuff so that we can manage and control it means that we inevitably create categories out of things that aren't in fact separate. And I think the reality is, ever since, you know, the website came along, I mean, it used to be the telephone. People were amazed when you put a telephone number on an ad, you know, that kind of transformed it. And now we've got, you know, the QR codes or the internet addresses.
Sure.
Every medium is now connected to every other medium in some way or another, because you've got an information flow and you've got a consumer's attention flow that you are trying to match together. So, you know, it doesn't make it any easier. It's only going to get more complicated.
Right.
And what I think is very interesting about this idea of really understanding individuals, which is, of course, what ethnography is about. And, of course, the great thing about ethnography, it goes back to the paradox. You have people saying, oh, I never buy anything on offer because I'm not that kind of consumer, and there they are, helping themselves to the stuff on offer. So, again, it's just, you know, how we get into the truth.
Just expensive.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, we are coming up on our time right now. I know, Jack, do we have time for questions?
10. Jim, I can't let your comment go without.
Sorry, Jack, sorry.
Yes, that was.
Far be it for me to be humble, but I think we're on the same page, because the purpose
Usually.
of the comment was to really focus on the shift from reach frequency analyses of the past and current, but also toward the importance of ROI and activation in terms of how it's performing against goals. So can the panelists talk a bit about what the outdoor industry and what you're doing individually to help move the needle in the legacy media industry into the same kind of marketing mix analytics that clients are doing?
Well, I mean, in a lot of markets outside, and I was very sad to see the demise of touchpoints in the US, because it's a core driver of behavior in the United Kingdom, and we have similar products in other markets. So that whole, having the data about how people are consuming media in a mixed sense is very much part of what we're doing. Most of what I'm doing these days, you know, we tick the box of the TAB equivalent data. You know, that's just a given, you have to have that. And we're moving on much more to insight-based research with ethnography and trying to talk to our customers about how our medium fits into their daily life of the brand, their business goals. I'm very taken, actually, by one of my first sales directors who pointed out to me that, you know, marketing's a very small part of a client's business, and advertising's a tiny part of that. And now with the huge range of different ways that we're communicating with people that aren't siloed advertising, it's even smaller still. So it's really about us having insights about how we fit in this general society and how it works, and getting to people with research that's relevant for that shows them how we can affect their business, and not really talking so much about advertising all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, Jack, I would just add to that I just want to say, kind of repeat a bit of what I said a moment ago. It's think about the role the medium plays in changing consumer behaviors or attitudes. And that's not a foreign concept to this industry, because this medium has been sold for many, many years on the path to purchase notion, that we can intercept a consumer on their way to the store because we know brand decisions are made very much at the last minute. So it's that kind of thinking that will amplify and build the ROI that will then show up in the models positively.
We have time for one question. I think anyone have a question? I know it's difficult in an audience like this. We're going to come back and have a brief conversation right after the break with Jack Sullivan, so I know you're going to want to be back here for that. Jack, you didn't know that until this very second. So we have one question, David Cutler. Quick question, quick answer.
Wanamaker was right. Mary and everybody, you're talking about path to purchase. It's the last thing you guys said. It's what we've been talking about for the past 10, 20 years. How does mobile intersect with out-of-home, this industry, on the path to purchase? So I'm talking about mobile specifically and how it fits into all the signs that you're going to see between here and the store.
I truly don't have a good answer for that. I don't. And I think a lot of that has to do with mobile measurement kind of needs as help. It's behind outdoor, actually, which is great for outdoor. But there's not enough data to prove that because of the way that the ads are served in the mobile medium. The ad servers aren't ready to give you that data back. It's a little bit different when you're serving through your own app on your own platform, but it's tough to ascertain that. Right now, we think it works. It makes sense that it could, but you can't prove it out. I think the same thing could be held true for social media. A lot of people are spending a lot of money on Facebook and some money on Twitter, but all of the research that I've done there and the modeling that I've done with social media proves that it actually doesn't pay out as well as other media. So I think we're still in the infancy stage there, and there's a lot more to come.